All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Thompson Nicola Invasive Plant Management Committee meeting. My name is Jamie Vieira. I'm going to kick things off here. I just want to do a sound check for those who are online. Can you hear us from the boardroom? Okay, we got a thumbs up. And for those in the room here, when you're speaking, just a reminder to use your microphone. Otherwise, the people on the screen can't hear us talk. So there's just a little button on the microphone and then shut it off after you're done speaking. So before we get started, because we continue to have kind of different people and alternates sitting in the seats here, we want to do a quick round of introductions of everyone who's in the room. And please, when you're introducing yourself, just clarify your role as a committee member if you are a committee member, because I know a lot of people in the room here are observing or staff supporting, and then we have the committee members online and sitting in the middle circle here. So maybe I'll start with myself, Jamie Vieira, Deputy General Manager of Operations, so staff here at the Tnrd.
Jake Devlin, General Manager of Operations, staff.
I'm Scott Hildebrand. I'm the CAO for Thompson Nicola Regional District.
Graham Gielens, Environmental Roadside Manager with Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure. Technically the alternate for Donna Olson, who couldn't be here today, although I suspect that with her workload, she's probably going to be stepping back quite a bit. So I may be the main point of contact from this point on, but I will confirm that.
Barbara Roden, Director of Tnrd for the Village of Ashcroft and Vice Chair of the Invasive Plant Management Committee.
Ken Gillis, I chair the Thompson Nicola Regional District Board, and I am an ex officio member of the committee.
Christina Vales, I am the invasive plant summer student, staff.
Emily Anderson, I'm the invasive management technician and staff.
I'm Colleen Hogan. I'm the invasive plant management coordinator. I'm also staff.
Herb Graham, Tnrd Director for Area N and a committee member.
Agnes Satt, Deputy Corporate Officer for the Tnrd.
All right, thanks everyone. And online, who do we have there? Jessica?
Why? Jessica Allen with Kamloops Forestry, Field Tech. Alternate for Dwayne. Thanks.
Thanks, Jessica. And Holly?
Oh, there, I'm unmuted now. Yes, Holly Campbell. I'm from the Kamloops Stockmen's Association and represent the new rep on the committee for representing the agriculture sector.
Thanks, Holly. Morgan.
Hello, my name is Morgan Jumbo, Welcome Tribal Council in Merritt from the Lands Department, Camille.
Thanks, Morgan. And Jennifer.
Hi, yes, I'm Jennifer Hegan and I work with the Invasive Species Council, British Columbia Provincial Council as their education facilitator for the Invasive Wise Education Program.
Perfect, thanks, Jennifer. And yeah, just then to clarify for everyone in the room, the voting members on the committee who are present here today would be Jessica, Holly, Morgan, Graham, Herb, and Director Roden. On that, I think I'll turn it over to Agnes to go on to the election of committee chair and vice chair.
Thank you. As we've done in all of the other committees, and as this is the last meeting of the year before the general election, staff at this time would recommend that we retain the current chair and vice chair for this meeting. So by show of hands, please indicate that you are in favor of retaining the current chair and vice chair. Okay, looks like we're good to go. Thank you. So I will turn it over to Director Roden, who's sitting in for Director Kershaw today.
Thank you very much. Director Kershaw, who is the chair of the committee, unfortunately could not be here today. So as vice chair, I'm chairing the meeting today. So I understand a lot of it is going to be handing off to other people. So I will try and hand off elegantly and not drop the baton. First thing we have here is the minutes of the March 9th, 2022 Invasive Plant Management Committee meeting. And there is a recommendation. Director Graham, move the recommendation. Do we have a seconder? Thank you very much. Any errors or omissions on the minutes? Seeing and hearing none. All those in favor? That is carried. We move immediately into delegations, and we have Jennifer Hegan, who is the educational facilitator of the Invasive Species Council of British Columbia, here to talk about their education and outreach program. So Jennifer, please take it away and welcome.
Hi, thank you. First off, I do have a PowerPoint presentation. I'm not sure how visible all this is for those of you sitting in the meeting room. Is there a larger screen? Oh, I think I do see that. Is there a large screen in front of you? Okay, there is. Yeah, so just to let you know, actually, I'm joining you today from the rural community of the Bulkley Valley near the town of Smithers, and that's up sort of along Highway 16, halfway between Prince Rupert and Prince George in Wet'suwet'en territory. And I've been working with the Invasive Species Council just for a short while, just to take on the role of becoming the point person for teachers in our new invasive WISE education program. Well, the education has been a big part of the council for many years, but we sort of are upscaling the level of resources we have available online, and of course, adding people like myself to be personal support for teachers, and to work actually directly with regional invasive species organizations like yourselves, the Thompson Nicola Plant Committee, to really connect teachers and educators with some of the local experts and knowledgeable people in your area. So yeah, so that's the context. But I think I'll just start off by share screening with and doing a little bit of a slideshow to demonstrate what the Invasive Species Council does broadly, and then more specifically with the Invasive WISE Education Program, and then actually take you on a virtual tour of our website, and that gives you a good flavor of all the materials that we have available. And then I wouldn't mind, if time permits, to open up the floor to some discussion about the ways that we can collaborate, because as Colleen and I have already discussed, our programs can really enhance each other's work. So hopefully we have time for all that. Okay, so I'll just go over to my PowerPoint here. Okay, hopefully that's all coming up. So yeah, so the Invasive Species Council is actually the largest invasive species charity in Canada. So for the past 18 years, it's been working hard to grow, to address the growing need for strategizing together on BC's invasive plant management programs. So it has a very diverse group of directors, representation from all levels and types of government. The transportation and utility providers are on board. The industry and agriculture sectors are well represented. And we have talented staff that work from across the province, and include scientists and people who work in public communications, social media, reporting of invasive species and mapping, invasive species removal specialists, and action team coordinators, and of course, specialists in education. So it's quite a big dynamic organization, and partnerships are really key to achieving this mission of the council provincially. And so we work collaboratively, like I said, with many groups and many governments, such as First Nations governments and First Nations organizations. Regional organizations are so important, like the Thompson Nicola Regional District and the Plant Committee. And we work with youth group, teachers, and of course, right down to students. So we also do a lot of research. Of course, invasive species is a very dynamic and quickly changing field. So there's lots of current knowledge that's always being brought up to be accessible to the public through forums, webinars, and other social media platforms. Social media platforms are also a great spot where we promote the citizen science programs or the community science programs, which is a really growing field in all aspects of science these days, because of technology allowing everyday folks, you and I, with our phones or whatever we might have, to report, to observe the biodiversity around us, to report invasive species as we get to know them. And that's so critical to the mapping and understanding of invasive species science. So that's an exciting and dynamic part of our council's work that is probably something that RISOs, like regional groups like yourselves, might want to look at collaborating on. And then training is a really big component of what we do. We have e-learning courses, right, from specifics of herbicide applications and monitoring of all sorts of aquatic species and terrestrial species. There's lots of certifiable courses available through the council. And then last but not least is to educate and inform. Some of you might know some of the key programs like Play, Clean, Go, to get the public to be aware of transportation of seeds, let's say through tires and things like that. You might have that program running in your area. Clean, Drain, Dry, Burn It Local. So those are public education components. And then we of course have our education aspects with students and youth, which I'll be talking with you some more. But I think important for like my presentation and our discussion today is the fact that we have lots to offer the Thompson Nicola Regional District and its plant committee, but also is that today's discussion is for me to learn what you can offer to the Invasive Wise Education Program, and how we can work together to enhance the education of the teachers in your area, and particularly when they connect to invasive species through my program. I would like to help them connect to you. And so the collaboration is really just easy, but starting off with today's presentation and a chance to discuss, and then just keep in touch with me and my team with emails and phone calls and Zoom calls and all the other great means we have these days. So here we are, here's the education team. Stephanie Weinstein in the middle here is our fearless leader who's filling the big shoes of Sue Stannenforth, who worked with outreach and education for many years at the council, who's just recently retired. And then on the right is a woman who's so creative and fun as a teacher, who works on staff in the Caribou area at Williams Lake, who does really great education work and supports our invasive wise education program. So really this is what it is that we provided provincially across the whole province through virtual means and many other means, lessons that teachers can do that are really connected to the curriculum. So it's important for the teachers when they're planning, they can see right in an activity that they can check this meets their curriculum mandates with running these activities on invasive species. And that's really helps with their planning and the appeal of our activities, and they're hands-on and engaging. So they're contemporary and modern and becoming quite popular. The other really good aspect or the hook for this program is that we offer personal teaching support. So that's me giving you teachers a phone call and being available by Zoom and by all sorts of emails to sort of feed them ideas and ways to support their lesson planning. I even do virtual class presentations and do quizzes online with them, with their students, and can be sort of like the class guest and from a virtual standpoint. And then, of course, the other attractive part of the program is that I can work to connect the teachers with the local experts. So I see from your website all the great offerings that the Thompson Nicola region has to offer in terms of invasive plant education. Colleen has told me about so many engaging programs that you offer. And so I would like to connect teachers with people like yourselves and get a chance to maybe have some in-person experiences, because in-person, of course, is always the best, right? So yeah, just to kind of sum up what I said and to actually add the fact that we work directly also just with teachers. We do Pro-D sessions when they have Pro-D days, just to get teachers a chance to amongst themselves collaborate and learn from us about invasive species teaching. So like I said, I'm the teacher's go-to person. They can call me up anytime to discuss how to deliver engaging lessons both in the class and outdoors on invasive species. And we work directly with students by being like guest experts with virtual visits. And last but not least is we like to connect the class to the people and programs in their own community. So the appeal about teaching invasive species, why we think teachers are really gravitating to it, and it's growing, is that with all the many environmental issues that they want to address through their required teaching, is that many of them feel quite big and weighty and powerless, but invasive species education can be positive. It's local and it's really a very relevant environmental issue, with aspects of thinking globally about environmental issues, but really getting a chance to act locally. And of course, it's outside learning. So that's awesome. It's hands-on and students can see the impacts of their actions. So it's a really growing and appealing aspect of our education in BC. And when we're developing our lessons and the ones that have been developed, and the approach to teaching that we want to have is that it's not just about the specific invasive species, it's about connecting the biodiversity of BC, because of course, education is about emotion and appreciation, raising an awareness about something, encouraging a deeper understanding can all lead to more appropriate and inspiring action and sort of a real knowledge and empowered citizenship. So yeah, this is the positive side too. We want to emphasize about invasive species education, and that it's about restoring relationships with the land, and I think reconciliation can feed into that as well, which is a really significant part of the education work we're doing all across Canada, and that's sort of the type of messaging that we're also bringing into invasive species education. Restoration and reconciliation. We've done actually professional development with series with teachers where we've really kind of dived deeper into this theme, where we want to start by having an appreciation of native habitat and species become sort of the introduction to invasive species education, and that the knowledge and impacts of the land, including introduced species, is part of that. That we can change our behaviors to stop the introduction of invasive species, and that maintaining connections with the land that reflects mutual relationships is at the core of what we want to do. And I think I see that lines up quite a bit with some of the mission statements that the Thompson Nicola Invasive Plant Council is looking at. So just sort of some specific examples of activities where we have like 2 activities that really lend themselves to this idea of connecting with the land. And the one that's called Everything is One delves into traditional ecosystem knowledge and deep connections and reciprocal relationships that First Nations have been able to develop and teach us over the years, and we really want to carry through that knowledge and allow students to learn about the ethnobotany and get an appreciation for plants that way. And then the seasonal rounds is an example where how we can take invasive species education and turn it to a real year-round activity of observation and artistic activity. You can have, there's some beautiful artistic work that comes from sort of graphically showing how species, animal and plants, adapt and change to our environment over the seasons. So maybe as I'm starting to give examples of some of the really creative and great materials we have, I'll maybe just go over to another screen. Oops. I want to show you guys the website now, and where you get, I'll just show you some more activities, but I think this is our homepage of the ISCBC website, and up here in the corner, all these little icons, like all those little social media icons, there's also a YouTube icon, and the council's getting really diving deeper into creating more engaging videos, and video is becoming increasingly popular in a very effective way for education, right? And I think there's lots that the council is starting to do on video, and we can all collaborate and learn from them about that as well. So on our homepage for the website, for the YouTube, there's right up front a really good 1-minute introduction to invasive species in BC video that a lot of people look at. and it's great education tool for all ages. But also what's exciting is we have these playlists. So there's sort of a series of videos. We have one that's just like kids asking questions. And so other kids find that pretty engaging. I don't know if you guys can hear that. So there's a series of those that are just like 1 minute. And also we have in a series, well, that's not a very good graphic to show what I'm saying, but there's the one, actually, if I go back, there's a series on, oh, I can't see that because my screen is, oh yeah, here we go. How to, there's a whole series
walk up to me and just be like,
on how to identify Oxide Daisy, how to identify scentless chamomile. So yeah, these are really good how-to videos that we have available, all quite short and sweet. And so some specific to your region, and this is something maybe to think about collaborating on to learn about introducing videos to your website. And then so the other, all the activities that I've been talking about is sort of buried for now. We're looking at a revamp of the websites coming up, but for educators is the page where the public has access to all this. You don't have to sign up for the program, but there's the icon and more information about the program right here, being where you get access to me to communicate with. But we have all our activities are no longer just big files to download and print off, which is really valuable. They're still here on the website, but we have kind of more interactive ways of looking at our education program. You can search by subjects, so math, sciences, arts, it's all there, inside, outside. So like, for example, I'll go into this one amazing adaptations hunt, which is really geared to learning about how invasive species and plants in particular have such great features for allowing them to be invasive. I say great, it's just that they can be, nature can be amazing to understand. So all our activities have really good breakdowns of how they fit into the lesson plans, these related activities, so they can easily click over and compare or look at other activities to add to their lesson planning. Inquiry questions, because that's a big part of education these days, is the big questions that students are asking. What are we trying to answer with our learning today? And here are the links. So like I said, teachers can just say, oh, this covers off a mandated part of my course. I got it right here. We have documents or material like class handouts that belong to each lesson, and we have them in French, many of them. I'm bilingual as well, so I offer the invasive arts education program in French, which is really nice for French education teachers or French immersion, is that we have some of our resources in both languages because it can be hard to find some of these things. So like here's an example of a class handout. As kids go out and study plants, they're going to look at all these like things like seeds and spiny plants and all these things that are maybe features of invasive species, and sort of it's a real quick and easy way for teachers to have that kind of information at their fingertips. We offer good background, so like there's other documents that teachers can have to get them more comfortable with all the terms that go along with invasive species, like native and versus weed versus indigenous versus exotic. And so we offer each activity has good background, preparation, procedures. I'm probably getting you guys a little dizzy now. So links to how they can be in touch with us and extensions and other resources. So yeah, so that's what we have. That's always being updated and developed. But then of course, we have all our classic publications, which a lot of these activities are based on the really good materials in our just our education publications. We have like downloadable books from the Canadian Invasive Species Council on that are like really good class handouts that are a part of these. Actually, I can show you here another easy spot. So I'm not sure with your outreach activities, we have all these sort of booklets that can be downloaded and handed out, and pages that activity sheets for students. So yeah, we also have like Indigenous publications too, to focus on traditional ecosystem knowledge approaches to invasive species education as well. So maybe I'll just go back to my my presentation. Where is that? Here we go. I've offered you guys a bit of a tour. Oh yeah, so there's an outcome that was really great. We did recent activity where you design an ultimate invasive species, and here's some examples of some of the creativity that kids can have, and especially when they present the information that goes along with it. As to, after studying the characteristics of invasive species, they came up with some pretty wild and maybe futuristic things that could happen to us as invasive species adapt. Yeah, so I just want to go back and sort of in conclusion here to emphasize the collaboration. That's why I'm joining you today, is that I've shown you the Provincial Council has lots of good teaching materials and ideas to help not only teachers become more knowledgeable, but also to inspire and empower their students about taking action on invasive species. So, but starting right in the classroom and then moving outdoors, and then maybe allowing for experiences to reflect on the learning. So this is where I think our staff and teaching materials make it easy for ongoing teaching of invasive species plants, that in conjunction with the presentations and activities that you're doing. So I'm sort of I'm kind of the bookends to what you're doing. And I think the result is that we have longer and greater engagement by students and school community in invasive plant action. So that's why I kind of want to emphasize that the collaboration is important. And now I just maybe, I wouldn't mind, I don't know if now's a good time or maybe at the end of your meeting to sort of ask you if you have any ideas on ways that you would like to have the invasive species our education program at least support your programs, or maybe what you could offer to me. So as teachers sign up and I want to connect them with what's going on in your community, we can I can help them, direct them to some of what you do. I know there's a lot there. If anyone has any questions.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Ms. Hegan. Jennifer, if I may,
Yeah.
Does anyone have any questions, comments, suggestions? Director Gillis.
Hi, and thank you very much for your presentation. Education is clearly has to be a priority in this world of invasives. And you mentioned that one of your goals, and this is not really to do with education, I'm sorry, but one of your goals is to change behavior in order to stop the importation of invasives. And my recollection from when I was earlier involved with this committee is that there was no law prohibiting nurseries and garden shops and so on from importing invasives into the province. I was just wondering, is there any change to that? Has such a law been enacted while I wasn't watching?
I can't say that I know that enough about the legislative side of invasive species and where we're at. I know there's the plant-wise education program where there's publications being distributed to plant stores on showing pictures of what the alternative is to planting some of the exotics that come in through the plant stores, and what the native alternative is in terms of the look and the appeal of that plant. So there's a lot of, and there's people on staff, they're working directly with nurseries to bring up the knowledge level right within the nurseries. So that's about all I know, but I can certainly look into it for you too. That's probably not hard for me to ask a few people and find out.
Thanks. I think we can look into it probably at this end. I just wondered if offhand you had the answer for that question, but I recognize it was not an education question. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Morgan, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, Jennifer, this is Morgan Jumbo, Welcome Tribal.
Yeah,
I'm very interested in the online education piece or in-person piece. We have a number of field crew who conduct forestry surveys on cut blocks. We're currently working on some work along Highway 8 and with Trans Mountain as well. Our technicians do have like a broad background in plant identification, but I'm wondering if Invasive Species Council of BC would be able to maybe have like a half day with some of our field technicians, maybe just to go over some of the maybe 25 or so. I can't remember what the list was, but there was a list created. Yeah, so just wondering if you might be able to help us out, maybe a couple of the other banned entities in the Nicola Valley.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds like, yeah, it's important. Like that's the crux of invasive species work right there, is making sure people on the ground are have a lot of skills and knowledge. So I can't say one way or the other right now what we have the capacity for, when and how that can happen. I'm sure it can happen. And so I'll just have to take your request and pass it on to a few people that I know that can give you an answer. Yeah. Maybe I'll I don't know whether you're able on your computer use the chat or something. Is there the chat there to pass on your email, or I can maybe ask Colleen or someone after the presentation to get your contact information?
Okay.
Colleen?
So Jen, I was just wondering if you could maybe comment on the scope of the materials that you guys have available, and like I'm talking, or is most of the content provincial in scope, and obviously you delve outside of invasive plants into other species as well?
Yeah, the scope is to provide a good background to invasive species, and it's to have activities that address, of course, the aquatic invasive species as well as terrestrial, and to have students participate in some of those larger behavior campaigns, like Don't Let It Loose. We have activities around that, like understanding how pets can be introduction to invasive species. So it is broad in scope that way, but we tend to, all our activities, tend to pull into examples from across the province of species. Let's say the plant species for certain games. So that's where it's important, where my work comes in, where I can sort of fine tune those activities to match the region that they're coming from. And so that's where I go and look at like your websites and say, okay, yeah, these are the key target species for this area of Thompson Nicola or the Kamloops or whatever. And then I'll sort of fine tune the activities or suggest the better activities for what the teachers wants to look at. Because some teachers say they're interested in doing a weed pull on specifically the knapweed that's in their backyard. To then some are, of course, looking at the idea of mapping the spread of invasive species. Like the high school level, we offer mapping activities for them. So they're looking at broader scope. And then, of course, some are right into the aquatics.
And just to let you guys all know that Jen and I had kind of talked about potential models to collaborate, and the idea is kind of like we would co-advertise education programming, and teachers would obviously be directed to the ICBC website because they have the bulk of the material. But if there was ever a request for a local presentation or a weed pull, that's when the TNIPMC would go out and visit the schools. But I was also thinking that Jen mentioned having more regional focused materials available for teachers is maybe a role we could fill either by providing information to Jen or creating those materials ourselves. So that's just kind of the conversation we've had. So just want to get the general feel of what you guys think about what role we should play in this.
I mean, I can just sort of jump in that even just sort of, I know keeping up websites update is a whole other aspect of work these days, but to have just links, direct links to our webpage would maybe be a really simple way to begin that.
Thank you. I mean, I think that things obviously specific to the TNRD, and it's not just specific to the TNRD, but it's specific to different areas of the TNRD, because we've talked about the Tree of Heaven, which seems to be right now isolated in sort of the southwestern corner. So that's an issue in that area of the TNRD, but not up in the northeast corner. So, you know, things that target the different areas. And then as far as kids go, letting them know, I mean, what to look for. And I mean, I saw on one of your slides, Jennifer, was one of the questions from one of the kids was, why do invasive plants look so pretty? And that is, you know, absolutely a valid question. And I think, you know, taking that approach when we're talking to kids, you know, how many kids out in the wild will pick a bouquet of pretty flowers for mom or dad, and the kids are picking invasive plants and don't even know it.
Mhm.
So, you know, I think that's really good, is taking a cue from the kids. What questions are they asking, and then tailor the materials to what the kids are concerned about, or what they're interested in, or what they're picking up on, because sometimes they pick up on stuff that an adult wouldn't even think about. Like, why are they so pretty? I don't know, but they are.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, and I think that's what some of the education and communication specialists in our group are really starting to pick up on as well. It's a really good point that the more we interact with our clients, I guess I'd like to call them, the more we learn how to better deliver the answer their questions, deliver the right information. So yeah, so like that's a way to collaborate, is like if you guys are working more with people on the ground and they're coming up with these questions, and I know, and the council will knows how we can adapt and customize the information that we're getting out there to be more poignant, I think, more specific to what they're asking, more effective.
Jennifer, Graham Gielan's here with Ministry of Transportation. So first of all, great to meet you virtually. I'm sure we'll be talking more. It's a very important role that you have. From Modi's perspective, it's great to support, you know, education of kids in schools and stuff. That's really where it starts. But a big area that we're concerned about is like education of contractors, of people working out on the ground. And even in the last year or so, I've noticed that there's been a lot more interest in those contractors, you know, receiving that kind of training. So just a heads up that that's something that I would love to see more of. You know, really, they're the people that are on the ground doing the work now, and most of them, you know, they're already working, they're already out of high school and everything, so they may have missed that training growing up. So it's kind of a sector that I think it's important to focus on because they do have that big impact now. And then just, well, I've got the floor, just to answer your Director Gillis's question about the legislation around selling invasive species. He is correct, that hasn't changed as far as I'm aware. So it's still possible to sell invasive plants in nurseries, unfortunately. It's something that at the ministerial and provincial level we're advocating to change, but so far has not happened.
Maybe I can just quickly show you the website where I can answer your questions. I'll just scroll up here to what we do. Where's the Learning Center? So there's the e-learning, like customized training. Oh, I guess you can fill in the website, but there's all sorts of courses that might be relevant to both what Morgan is speaking to and Modi here. Community science, plant-wise, invasive species, pesticide application certificate, invasive species local government toolkit, invasive species and forestry courses, real estate and land use courses. So just fairly new to the organization myself, I don't know these courses in depth, but they're starting to get more and more very technical skills available to learn through e-courses. So anyways, that's something to go check out on the website when you get a chance.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. Any other questions, comments, suggestions? No? All right, thank you again for your presentation today, Jennifer. You've given us a lot to think about, and do we have Jen, or can we get hold of you through the website?
Yeah, so maybe invasive wide education program, or Colleen maybe is another easy, fast, easy way to pass on my email.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
All right, we move on to presentations. Is the next set, and the first presentation is from Colleen. Oh, is it? I'm sorry. Have I skipped ahead? Let's see where I am here. Oh, coordinators report. Okay.
All right, so I've kind of been keeping you all up to date monthly with my monthly emails to you. But first of all, I just wanted to highlight again that we do have a new committee member, Holly Campbell, who's joined us from Kamloops Stockmen's Association. Holly, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I might. Did you want to maybe introduce yourself and let us know a bit about your background?
Oh, sure. Thanks, Colleen. I don't think I'm on video, am I? No. I'm a rancher east of Kamloops. We're near the Barnhart Vale area. And our land is quite close to the city of Kamloops, and some of it borders Buse Lake protected area. We get a lot of pressure from people using our place, and we have a lot of weeds that get spread by various different ways. So we have a large task, as a lot of landowners do, and we take advantage of the Tnrd program that helps us with some of our spraying with product. And so as a rancher and representing other ranchers in our community, weeds are a big problem for us, and we like to take the approach that Jennifer was making too, that we're really interested in education. We think that's our best ally, is having the public know about weeds and the problems that they can cause. And it's an incredible expense for ranchers in the loss of our grazing lands, and also in controlling them. It takes, everyone on this committee knows how much time it takes and how much energy and how expensive it is. So I'm really happy to represent the agriculture community and be part of this committee, because the weeds have such an impact on our environment and on our, for those of us in agriculture, on our industry. They affect our bottom line. So I think the committee has served a wonderful purpose over the years, and I'm looking forward to participating.
Hey, thanks, Holly, and we're really happy to have you and have someone from that sector join us again. So,
and we just have a hand up. Director Gillis has a question, comment.
Hi, Holly, it's Director Gillis, and I just want to say that that I've been involved in this committee for many years. I am absolutely delighted that you have become a member of this committee. Your input is going to be invaluable. We're very fortunate to have you, and thanks very much for taking the time to join the committee. It'll be a much richer committee with your participation.
Thanks, I'll do my best.
okay, you took the words right out of my mouth. Thank you. So moving on is just a quick update from the ministry, well, related to the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure. So Graham has been working his magic and has been able to secure some additional funds for invasive plant management in flood and fire impacted areas this year. So I don't know, Graham, if you want to speak to that now, give a quick update on that.
Happy to speak to that. I'll just keep it really quick. So recognizing the impacts of the flooding and also the fires along Modi right of way and the surrounding lands, but really focused on the flooding, which caused huge amounts of erosion. I'm sure you've seen all the pictures and you're very aware of all the impacts to the infrastructure, and are probably also aware of all the remediation that's going on with very large amounts of rock and gravel and soil and fill materials that have been brought in. The last estimate I heard in March was about 30,000 truckloads. So that is a lot of material that's being moved around. And whenever you're moving material, there's a potential for spread in that weed spread in that material itself, as well as on machinery that's moving around, and also to a lesser extent due to the flooding itself, moving materials and spreading weeds. So recognizing that potential spread of invasives due to that, I reached out to see if we could secure some more funding for management this season. I was successful in getting $200,000 for the province this season, of which I'm directing 95,000 to the Tnrd. So the Tnrd figure was probably the most impacted area, particularly Highway 8 was definitely the most severely hit highway in the province, but also sort of the northern section of the Coquihalla, as well as areas down towards the southern border, getting close to the kind of Aspen Grove area. The remainder of the funds I've directed to other areas, including the Okanagan-Smilkameen, a large portion to the Fraser Valley, which is sort of dealing with the southern half of the Coquihalla, as well as Highway through Manning, and then Lillooet as well, which has some areas that were impacted. So it's a little bit tough to plan for, because we don't know exactly what we're going to find. We do have maps of areas that were disturbed and where material is being moved to. But exactly what condition those will be in and what will potentially come back is a little bit of an unknown. We do have some guesses based on where material was coming from. So for example, Highway 8 and northern Coquihalla area, we're really concerned about blueweed. A lot of material, unfortunately, did need to come from those areas. It was an emergency situation. We were anxious to get the roads open as quickly as possible, so we needed to get material wherever we could source it from. So that's why I've tasked Colleen to take on that funding and focus mainly on initial survey and inventory of those areas, first of all, to see what is there, and then depending on what we find, focus on as much treatment as possible. So just waiting for, we've got a letter agreement or an amendment to our letter agreement drafted up to transfer those funds, just waiting to get those that signed and returned back, and then we'll be able to get you the funds to begin those operations. It is only for this season so far. My ask was for 3 years though, with kind of a reduced amount for the following 2 years. I've only heard back of confirmation for this year though, although I'm optimistic that it will carry forward in the next couple of years, especially if we get out there and find that there's a good reason to continue this work. So I think that's all I can say about that one right now.
All right. And I'm super excited and happy that you pulled that out of the hat. So thank you. For those that didn't read my last update, just an update that we received our annual grant from Ministry of Forest. The value is $26,000 this year, which is just under half of what we had requested and less than last year. But despite the reduction, we're still happy to receive the money from MOF. So, and on behalf of the committee, want to thank them for their contribution this year. I have for you. So we've also, the committees or the Tnrd has also participated in a local government network invasive plant program case study. We were one of 3 local governments highlighted in a case study developed by the Invasive Species Council of BC. So the case study just simply demonstrates the various invasive plant program structures across governments and shares benefits and challenges of each model. I think that case study, I emailed it to you folks, but I can send it again if you want to read it. Update from Trans Mountain. So I reached out to Trans Mountain to see if they'd attend this meeting as a delegate, but they declined as all their staff are now in field operations. They did share their recently updated veg management plan, which has been shared with you as an attachment to the meeting agenda. The relevant sections of the plan is 4.3 and 4.7, which outlines their monitoring program. And essentially, their monitoring plans remain vague and pretty much just highlights pre and post treatment monitoring requirements, treatment thresholds, priority areas for treatment. However, the plan still negates any reference to long-term monitoring plans or commitments. So I've been told verbally by staff that monitoring will continue for the life of the project. However, this isn't indicated in their veg management plan that I could find anyways. An update from the Tnrd. Jamie and I just met with each, well, first of all, I'm going to talk about the service expansion. So we've offered our invasive plant management program services to member municipalities, and we had 5 join. And that would be Clearwater, Sun Peaks, Logan Lake, Merritt, and Clinton. And Jamie and I went out last month and met with each of the municipalities and talked about what some of their education and outreach needs might be for staff in the community. We issued a press release on May 11th, just announcing the service expansion, and we've got ads out highlighting it. Been pretty quiet so far, but I anticipate we'll get more interest as the plants come out. But yeah, that's an update on the service expansion. And Jamie, do you have anything to add on that?
Just that we'll probably get more calls when it stops snowing in part of the region. So.
Okay, fair enough.
Just as a purely hypothetical question, if someone here were a journalist who wanted to write a little story about this, who would be the person to contact, you or you pointing each other?
Probably me. It goes to me and I write it and then Jamie reviews it before it goes out.
Perfect. I'm asking for a friend.
Okay, we're happy to help your friend. So moving on, just an update on staffing. So we've completed our team for this year. We've hired our summer student, Christina, who's right here. She's going to be mostly focusing on education and outreach, but still supporting a little bit on operations. And we also rehired Emily Anderson, who's back here, as our invasive plant technician. So her role's 99% operations. So she'll be helping monitoring the MODI treatments and that sort of stuff. Again, we have an intern who's in the house. It's nice to meet you. He's going to spend a week with the invasive plant program. So our initial plans right now are to assign him the task of kind of updating the invasive plant program bylaw. But there might be other things that come out of the woodwork. Update from Invasives BC, which is the new provincial invasive plant database. So we just received correspondence from Ministry of Forests, Crystal Chadburn, that IAP is going to remain live and fully functional for the remainder of 2022. 2022 is going to be a transition year. It's expected that IAP will be archived for 2023 and only Invasives BC will be available next year. So this is a transition year from IAP to this new program, but we can use IAP up to December 31st is what I understand. There's a recommendation that core staff start using Invasives BC once it's launched, but that the contractors keep status quo with IAP for this year. An update from on GCC and Friends of Lac du Bois. So the TNIPMC continues to support the GCC and Friends of Lac du Bois on their invasive plant control and grassland restoration project up in Lac du Bois protected area. Just to recap, for those that you are unaware, GCC received $5,000 in 2022 and a big lump, $25,000 in 2023 from Environment and Climate Change Canada and the Canadian Wildlife Service to support workshops and implementation of invasive plant control and grassland restoration projects to improve habitat for species at risk in Lac du Bois protected areas. So the GCC hosted a workshop in April to kind of narrow down where the invasive plant management activities would take place. And it was decided by the group that the target for this year is going to be the Red Hill area. The next steps for them is in developing management plans for the area and carrying out the management this year. I think the funds expire this year, so they're kind of in rush mode to get a plan set up and contractors out managing. There was also mention that there is reed canary grass near Tronquil along the Thompson River. And they were talking with Catherine Tarasoff about doing some benthic barrier trials to see if they would work in managing the reed canary grass. Just an update on some of the activities our staff have been up to. So April 25th, we co-presented with the Invasive Species Council of BC at the Kamloops Thompson Teachers Association Cody Day. We had 10 teachers attend the session. I was a little disappointed in the numbers, but according to the coordinator, there were 50 sessions, so apparently 10 teachers was pretty good. We had staff attend CD Saturday and CD Sunday in Clinton and Clearwater, reaching just over 100 people. Staff attended the local government day in Logan Lake yesterday. I think there's about 40 people that went through. I provided an update at the Kamloops Stockmen's Association meeting in May. And I'm working with Catherine right now to finalize a location for a yellow flag iris workshop, again at Pinnetan Lake. There is a private landowner who has the largest infestation in front of his property and on his property, and he's agreed to let us host the workshop there. So we're hoping he gets free management, but we got a location for a workshop. So that's all in the works right now. And then we added a few new profiles to our website. We've now added profiles for Burr, Buttercup, Tree of Heaven, and Myrtle Spurge. So those are additions to the website. We're also working with the Kamloops 4x4 Club to get some cycling go signs out in Lac du Bois at the marshalling points. Upcoming events for you folks. May 19th is a webinar, Risks and Regulation of Invasive Plants in a Changing Climate. June 1st is the BC Institute of Agrologists AGM, and June 7th to 9th is the National Invasive Species Climate Change Symposium. And that's all for my update.
Try that again with the speaker on. Thank you very much. Any questions? Yes, Graham.
Just one question about coordination or conversation with Trans Mountain. Who have you been speaking to? I spoke to Brian McMahon recently, and he expressed that he was very interested in being more involved. Is that the impression you got?
Yeah, I did speak to Brian. He did come to the land managers meeting.
Yes. Okay.
So I did ask him to come as the delegate.
Okay. Just wasn't available.
He just wasn't available.
Okay.
So they also agreed for us to kind of review their species list in the vegetation plan to make sure none are missing that are on our regional priorities, and they would kind of tailor for this area.
Yeah.
To make sure they're targeting the right plants. But yeah, I do have contacts for their whole invasive plant team that kind of works in the Tnrd.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
That's good to know. Yeah, and my conversation with Brian was pretty good. He was, I passed on your information. Well, I guess, sorry, he already had your information. I mean, the information for other resources that he didn't have, and expressed that he should reach out to them to get local priorities. And he said he was going to do that. So hopefully we'll keep him to that. Good to hear. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions? Just glad to see the newspaper articles coming out from Dr. Tarasoff again this year.
Yes.
The first one that came out was about the wild seed mixes, you know, how you see the packets of the wild seeds and you think, oh, there's that bare spot near the shed, I'll just toss that out there, and how a lot of them are invasive. So I know that in the newspaper in Ashcroft, when I published it, it got a lot of chatter on Facebook, a lot of people sharing it, saying, oh yes, how true. And so, you know, maybe it'll get a few people to check the packet or reconsider, which is the whole point. But they're very helpful articles. They're very well written too, very engaging.
I'm glad you enjoyed them. There'll be 3 more coming your way. We also did a follow-up campaign on our Facebook page about, we just had a poster on like, check your wildflower seed packages. And this all came because Catherine was at the big box outlet and they were selling a shelf full of baby's breath seed. And she's like, oh my God, should I just buy them all? And I'm like, that's not really a feasible solution to the problem. Because guess what? Home Depot's selling them too. So yeah, that's where all that idea spurred from.
I'm now picturing her scooping them all up and taking them all out into the parking lot and then just dumping them all in a trash can or burning them all or something. Okay, well, thank you very much. Do we need to receive this for information or? For me? Okay,
Nothing to be received on 7.1.
okay, so we move on to item 7.2. And Colleen, are you doing this one as well? This is updates to the operational plan for terrestrial invasive plant management in the Thompson Nicola region.
So just a quick overview for those that don't know what this document is. So way back when the TNIPMC assigned a technical advisory committee to work on the development of a regional operational plan for terrestrial invasive plant management in our region. The plan is a tool to coordinate invasive plant management. It contains priority invasive species lists and management objectives for each species. And we further divided that into invasive plant management areas. And there's a list for each area. And we're hopeful that anyone carrying out invasive plant management within the Tnrd kind of references or uses this document as a guideline. So the document was approved last year, 2021, but part of our role is to continue monitoring and making updates to the plan. So in January of this year, the Technical Advisory Committee carried out its first annual review, and I just wanted to take the opportunity to highlight some of the changes to the plan this year. Sensitive. So yeah, we'll just kind of talk about plants that were added or removed from lists, some of the category changes to plants, containment area updates, and then some of the items we're tracking to monitor the plan. And if you want a more recent version of the plan, it's available on the Tnrd website under invasive plant management services and resources. All right, so skip one, there we go. Plants removed from the regional list this year. So the first one we took off was bachelor's button. The Technical Advisory Committee didn't feel it was really a super high priority plant in our region. And although it can act invasive, it's usually contained to urban areas and gardens, and it's not really widespread across the landscape. And the second plant we took off was bittersweet nightshade. Mostly because there's insignificant inventory data for this plant to make proper management decisions on it. The plant doesn't appear to be widespread across the landscape. It's most commonly found in wet, moist areas like riparian areas and stream sides, and doesn't seem to really move into interior forests or grassland areas. So these species, although they're taken off the regional list, they've been added to what we call our other invasive plant lists, which we monitor each year, and we kind of go through them to see if they stay on the other list or if they need to get moved on to the regional priority list. So just because they're off the regional list doesn't mean that they're going to be forgotten. So just opening it up to you folks if there's any concerns about having these plants taken off the regional priority list. It's all good. Okay, we'll move on. So plants that we added to the regional list this year, we added 3. The first is Tree of Heaven, and we added it as a category A Eradicate species. So we added this based on the request of Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, who wanted to heighten the profile and management of this plant. For those that don't know, the tree is the host to the spotted lanternfly, which if it's introduced to BC could have detrimental impacts to vineyards and orchards. The closest confirmed sighting of spotted lanternfly is in Oregon State, but there's been unconfirmed reports of it in Washington State. Tree of Heaven's really quite prolific in this Okanagan-Similkameen, so we kind of want to keep this tree out of our region just to protect our resources. We also added cutleaf blackberry as an eradicate species. This is because we have very few infestations and don't want it to establish. As most of you are aware, there's quite a heavy infestation of blackberry in the lower mainland. So the potential for it to kind of creep up that, I forget what the Highway 12 corridor, the one between Lytton and Kamloops, is pretty high. We also added Oxide Daisy as a monitor and site-specific control species, just because it's mostly a concern for ranchers, and we don't want them to think we are negating this this plant. It's on our radar, but it's kind of one of those ones like, it's not, I don't want to say it's like knapweed, but it's so widespread that management options are limited. So any concerns or comments about these ones being added to the list? All right. Moving along. So this winter, we ran the survey data for each invasive plant on our regional list, which included the data we collected in 2021. And based on the changes in distribution across the landscape, there were a few plants where the management objective categories were changed. I don't want to read them out to you. You guys can see them on the screen there. But if you have any concerns about those changes, feel free to voice them or ask any questions about why they were changed. Does anybody have any concerns about the changes we made? Having a quick look. Right. Hearing nothing, we'll move on to containment area updates. So just as a refresher, the management objective for all category C containment species is to treat all infestations outside of their designated containment areas while managing high priorities within the containment area. Again, we ran all of the inventory data, including 2021 inventories, and reviewed each of the containment areas drawn for category C species. There were a few updates or directions made for several of them. The first is for blueweed. There was no physical change in the containment area boundaries, but we did recognize that there's limited inventory data in Pritchard, McClure, and Nicola Ranch areas. So we essentially know that the plants are there, but there's no information in the provincial database. So this year we're going to be targeting some inventories around those areas to confirm the containment area boundaries. Again, similarly, leafy spurge, no change in the physical boundaries, but we do know that the plants are moving eastward towards Pritchard and that they're in Pritchard, except IAP doesn't show them in Pritchard. So we'll go out there and do an inventory of leafy spurge in that area. Nodding thistle, we did add a new containment area along Highway 1 from the Monty Creek exit to the Tnrd border, or east to the Tnrd border along Highway 1. There are too many plants there now to eradicate or effectively manage. There's also another strip of high infestation between Highway 5, which is between Kamloops and Merritt. And when we chatted about this infestation at our meeting in January, we didn't put a containment area there because I think MOTI wanted to chat with MOF to see if management was still feasible or not. So that one's still undetermined. There may be a containment area next year. We'll see how that goes. Russian knapweed, we added a new containment area between Clinton and Cache Creek along Highway 97, as the infestation there is quite significant. And that's all the changes to the containment areas. So any questions or concerns about these updates? Good. Okay, so monitoring the plan. As mentioned, the TNI PMC coordinates the development, administration, and monitoring of this plan. So in terms of monitoring, the Technical Advisory Committee decided it'd be a good idea to track a set of regional data each year so we can observe regional trends in management efforts over time. And essentially this data is really going to help us assess the successes, the challenges, and the gaps in information that need to be addressed. So 2021 was the first year that we were able to collect data for the monitoring purposes of the plan, and it's going to be used as a baseline to compare subsequent years to. So the next few slides are just going to show you some of the 2021 baseline data So the first thing we're tracking is regional investments. Each year we canvass key land managers in the fall to see how much they spent on invasive plant management for that year. So in 2021, we reached out to 13 different land managers, and collectively they spent just about $1.8 million in our region on invasive plant management activities. We're also tracking regional organization efforts. So I don't want to read them out loud. You can kind of read what we're going to be tracking each year on the screen there. Just a note for you all that the number of sites with 0 hectares under surveys is indicative of the number of sites that will have been eradicated. So essentially there was a hectareage there, and now after surveying it's gone down to 0, meaning the infestation's been eradicated. Then there was also a suggestion from the Technical Advisory Committee to track private landowner information separate. So, and that would be based on the Tnrd invasive plant program services data. I guess for me, it seems, I can't remember the rationale and why we wanted to track this separate. I don't know, Graham, do you remember?
No.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess my question to the committee is, do we want to keep this private landowner data separate, or should we lump it into the grand total of the region?
I think it's always best to keep things separate when you can, and you can roll it up and lump it together later, but better to do it now and separate it out than later on realize that you did need that information teased out and have to sort through it after the fact.
Yeah, I just
If
think
it's not too much trouble.
for me, like we have this data tracked anyways internally, so it's always there.
Okay.
It's just for the purpose of monitoring this plan, do we need to tease it out? Or should we augment the regional total, I guess, by including it?
Like I said, I think it's a good way of measuring sort of the public engagement aspect of it, which is important. So I would suggest still keeping it separate.
I was going to say too, I think for the public engagement piece, especially with the 5-member municipalities having just entered the Thompson Nicola program, I think the more we can show what the program does for private people, whether that's ranchers or whether that's people within, say, the village of Clinton, I think it's just good because it's a way of showing, hey, you know, it's not just the Tnrd or the TNI PMC or Modi or whoever going out. It's private people. It's ordinary people doing their bit to fight the spread of invasive species.
All right, we will keep it separate. Thanks for your input on that. So just going back to, let's go back to this page. Is there any kind of items that you feel are missing from this table that we should be tracking on an annual basis? Comments on that?
If you're watching online, we actually cannot see you right now. So you could all be waving frantically to be heard and I would have no clue. So, okay, we can see you now. That's excellent. Has anyone online had anything that they've been trying to get our attention about? Okay, great. If you do have anything, just feel free to yell or put the hand up or whatever you have to do. Graham.
Just one more question. Can you remind me how frequently this will be reported out on? Is it annually or?
Yeah, so the committee agreed to update the data annually. I don't know if we want to make it a public report or just keep it internal.
Okay.
That's a discussion to be had, but yeah, annually these numbers would be run.
Okay, perfect.
And I think we'd summarize them in our annual report. So you guys seeing this year's annual report, some of this data would be used to create the information that goes in there, just maybe not this detailed.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
All right. All right, so that's the end of that agenda item. So we're good to move on to the next agenda item. We'll talk about our education and outreach. Yep. Oh,
Sorry, I
sorry.
keep forgetting to turn this thing on. There is a recommendation, and that is that the committee adopt the report titled Updates to the Operational Plan for Terrestrial Invasive Plant Management in the Thompson Nicola region. And to save anyone else saying that, I will make that motion if I'm allowed to as chair. Am I allowed to as chair? I have no clue.
We're pretty informal committee here, so I think that's fine.
Oh,
There's nothing
Okay,
in the
I'm
terms of
good.
reference
So-
that would indicate otherwise.
I'm just going to be daring and make that motion. Do I have a seconder? Graham, thank you very much. All those in favor? That is carried. All right, item 7.3, I understand, Colleen, this is you again.
All right, so I just wanted to take some time to bring you all up to speed on what we're planning in terms of education and outreach for this year. And some of it, a lot of it's going to be familiar based on what we did last year. First of all, our confirmed operating budget for 2022 is $41,000, which is slightly less than last year due to the decrease in funding from Ministry of Forests. But again, on behalf of the committee, I want to extend thanks to all of our funders for providing us with these resources so we can continue the program in the region. We have applied for a few other groups for additional funding, mostly to support with staff wages. So we did apply to Canada Summer Jobs and Eco Canada. I just got an update about Canada Summer Jobs. They've already started letting people know if they were successful or not. Our library was successful. We have not heard, although all their decision making is not complete yet, but our fund development person kind of said, don't hold your breath. So it's not looking promising for Canada Summer Jobs, but you never know. And we're also waiting to hear, we should know by June about the Eco Canada grant. We also applied to the Parks Enhancement Fund for the full amount of $5,000 to support our Earth Kids program throughout parks in the region. So if we're successful in obtaining all three grants, we'll receive an additional just under $30,000, with at least 10 of it going to the TNI PMC. The rest is probably to support staff wages for operations. Jamie?
Yeah, just to clarify, Christina, you're not going to be out of a job if we don't get the grant. We funded this position, but this would just be in addition, and we able to allocate some of the funding that was going for a position elsewhere.
Thanks, Jamie. Okay, so 2020 year was the final year of our contract with Agro West Consulting, who's been kind of assisting with the coordination and delivery of our education and outreach program. In January, we issued a request for quotation with only one proponent participating, and the good news was that it was Agro West Consulting. So we're happy to have Catherine and her crew back on board. We signed a 5-year contract with them. So yeah, we're our staffing, well, not directly staffed by Tnrd, but our invasive plant education team is growing quite a bit, and I've listed all of our team members up on the screen here. Jake, I apologize, you didn't make the cut, but Jake should be at the top of the list. So yeah, we have Catherine, Emily, Christina. Catherine has 2 summer students, Megan and Adria, and then we also have a shared summer student with Purity Feed, who is Courtney Campbell. So moving on, I've been trying to align all of our actions with the goals outlined in the TNI PMC strategic plan. So the next few slides will indicate the actions we'll be carrying out to support each of our goals. And the first goal we're going to talk about is to prevent establishment and further spread of terrestrial invasive plants in the Tnrd. So the first action is kind of acting as the regional invasive plant go-to organization. So again, we're here to answer public inquiries, provide information and resources. The phones have started ringing. I imagine they'll start getting busier. The second thing we're going to do is continue on with our Earth Kids program. So it was really well received by BC Parks last year. The program focuses on educating youth on invasive plants and preventing their establishment and spread. And we decided to expand this program this year and bring it into the classrooms in the region. So our staff are busy right now booking and delivering school presentations. They'll be doing them till the end of the school year. And the youth will get to learn about key messaging. They'll get an Earth Kids certificate and a little bag with coloring book and tattoo and that sort of thing. So it'll make them feel special and like Earth Kids. So we did advertise the program to past participating teachers. And we also worked with the school district 73 who put the program ad in their monthly bulletin. So that was a really great way to get this program out to the teachers in the region or in school district 73. We did get a contact in school district 58 who's invited us to their Pro D Day. So we'll be sharing, probably doing another joint presentation with ISCBC in that school district. We had great support from BC Park staff, Jude Sterling and Stephanie Russell, to continue the program in select BC parks this year. Last year, the program was delivered in Monk Park and Lac Lejeune. This year, we're going to focus on delivery in Kentucky Lane and Paul Lake. So we'll host, I think, 4 sessions at each of those parks and then do 1 or 2 supplemental sessions at Monk Park and Lac Lejeune Park. And the reason for this is to kind of reach different campers as well as address different invasive plant species in the park. And in addition to the outreach program, BC Parks asked us to carry out cursory invasive plant inventories in each of those parks. So that's why our ask for the Parks Enhancement funding was the full $5,000 just to help support with that work that will be done. The next is our annual field day. We had a little bit of chatting about it, and our proposed location for this year is Logan Lake. And that's for a few reasons. It's because they were impacted by the 2021 wildfires. And it is also, we were told that it's their 50th anniversary. So it goes nicely with them doing all their celebrations this year. And we're hoping to host it in July. The proposed format will be similar to other years where we'll have 5 stations and participants rotate through. And we thought we'd just highlight the kind of key priority invasive plants in and around Logan Lake. But if you guys have other locations you want us to consider or formats or ideas to include in the field day, feel free to speak up and let me know now.
Can you just remind the committee where the last few were?
Yeah, we did Barrier 2 years ago and Clinton last year, and the year before Barrier was Lower Nicola. So we're making our rounds kind of around the province or around the region. Yeah. All right, hearing nothing. I'm assuming you're all okay with Logan Lake as the location for this year. We are going to continue with the annual weed pull challenge. We've been doing it for the past 3 or 4 years. We invite community groups to register for the challenge and coordinate a weed pull event, and the group that pulls the most weight have a chance to win a $250 honorarium. Last year, I just found groups like GCC have a volunteer base of like 200 people, whereas other small community groups have a volunteer base of 4 people. So obviously their weights pull, they're always going to pull rank, and they've won the last 2 years. So I'm thinking about changing how we allocate the honorarium. Maybe it's average weight pulled per person, might be a little bit more fair. And we did only have 4 groups participate last year, but I'd like to attribute that to the wildfires. Nobody really wanted to be out, and that was the last thing on their mind was invasive plants. So I'm hoping to continue this year and that we get better numbers. But if you guys have ways that you want to share with me on how to get community groups more involved, I'm happy to hear them. Typically we advertise on our Facebook page, but if there's other ways to reach out to these groups, or if you know of groups that might be interested, we can directly reach out to them.
Colleen, it's Morgan.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is one part that I was trying to get, some of the band offices throughout the territory here more involved with. Would you be able to share that with me, and I could probably distribute it to the bands around the Merritt region here?
Yeah, that would be great, Morgan.
Yeah.
I'll follow up with an email and show you where the link to the website and the registration form is. We can, if you want to have a chat later about more details, we can.
Sure. Thank you.
I did have some interest from somebody who contacted me from what is the Kamloops Mountain Biking Club or Association. So they may be interested. Looks like they wanted to do some work on some of their trails, but maybe they could expand it into a challenge like this. Probably
Yeah.
get a lot of turnout for that.
Yeah, okay, that sounds good. We have been working with KBRA. Yeah, so they have also requested place bingo signs, so I can definitely connect with, I forget the person's name, but connect with them and let them know about it. Okay. Moving on, we are planning on continuing our partnership with the Tnrl mobile library this year. And it was really a great way last year to get out to those more rural communities and chat with library patrons about invasive plants. So essentially, we just have a booth next to the mobile library. There was option to actually have a table inside the library, but I think it just might be a bit too crowded. So we'll just continue with the booth on the outside and try and reach some people in more rural areas that way. Community workshops. We're planning on hosting at least 7 community workshops this year. We'll be hosting one in each of the 5 municipalities that join the Tnrd invasive plant service. So this is being carried out as an added value to those communities, and it's a great way to reach more people in those urban centers. We've set aside 2 additional workshops for more rural areas. So as you can see up here, last year we went out, we had a request from some of the ranchers out in Cherry Creek to come out and just do a workshop with residents. So we've kind of left those 2 areas to be determined for those workshops. But if any of you know of anybody any community that might want a workshop, let me know and we can reach out to them. Yeah, some of the examples that Jamie and I brainstormed were heading out to Upper Clearwater Valley or out towards 70 Mile House. But if you guys know of any more specific ones, we're open to hearing locations where that might be beneficial. We also have funding set aside to do a few targeted workshops for groups whose activities lead to the spread of invasive plants. We haven't confirmed which groups to target for this year. So if you have input on who you guys want us to target, now's your chance. And kind of speaking with Jamie, we kind of thought groups that don't know about invasive plants. So we don't really want to reach out to naturalist clubs because they essentially are in the now, but it would be other groups that we'd want to educate.
Just as kind of related to this, figuring out where to shoehorn this in. Yesterday, the government came out with the area restrictions in the areas around many of the wildfires last year are being continued. They were imposed in, I think, October 15th last year. And they're all continuing over massive areas. And it was interesting to note that one of the specific things on the FAQ page was about the spread of invasive plants in these areas that have had massive amounts of wildfire damage, soil erosion impacting the streams, etc. And one of the reasons for keeping the restrictions on is to stop the spread of invasive. So maybe that's something to tie into, again, with the off-road users who are going to be impacted by these restrictions. They're not going to be allowed to get into a lot of places that they normally can in summertime.
That's target ORV. So I think there is a regional or provincial ORV group. I'm not sure how they're structured. Does anybody know how they're structured and if there's like local chapters? No, okay. We can look into it. But yeah, I think ORV would be good. I know the Kamloops 4x4 and off-road club is interested in learning more. So that's one group, but I also want to like delve away from Kamloops a little bit. So if you come across any other or ORV groups, let me know. We can.
Kamloops group actually maintains the forest, the old forest fire lookout on the top of Cornwall Mountain, just to the west of Ashcroft. They took it over. The ministry was going to tear it down. It was built in the late 50s and they felt it was a hazard. They looked for a group to possibly take it over. And the Kamloops Four-Wheel Drive Association saw an article I actually wrote in the journal and went to the ministry and said, no, don't tear it down. We'll take it over and maintain it. So they do, for the benefit of its members, well, anyone really, but its members who use that whole network of trails up the side, up in the Cornwall Hills there. So, you know, they're Kamloops based, but they extend well beyond Kamloops. And that area is not subject to any area restrictions because there was no fire there last year.
Okay, that's good to know. We do have a contact at Kamloops 4x4, so we'll, I've already extended the invite for a workshop, but we'll push a little harder. Get them on board. Are there any other groups that you guys feel, or V is one, we could do more than one?
I wonder about some of the, I don't know if there's an association or not with the guest ranches within the Tnrd. In terms of, you know, their clientele.
Yeah, I don't know how that works, but I could
yeah. 'Cause
look
there's
into it.
There's a number in, you know, the Clinton corridor, Ashcroft to Clinton area.
Okay, we can look into that, even if it's just kind of going out to individual guest ranches or, yeah. I know when we're talking with the district of Logan Lake, they said their guest ranch is trying to get more proactive in this sort of stuff. So it might be an area to look into.
I don't know if this is a good suggestion or not, but I've never really worked with these guys too much. It's a Nicola Valley Fish and Game Club. I'm just wondering if, because of you know, some of the stuff that they might do around all the lakes and BC parks and like that, maybe could reach out to them.
Yeah, for sure. We can definitely look into it. I'll make a note of that group as well. All right, we'll move on to events. So as other years, we'll continue to supplement our program by attending community events such as fall fairs and farmers markets. We started a short list of events to attend this year, but if you folks know of any other ones or any that you think we should be at, let me know now. Is there any events in Ashcroft, Director Oden, that you know of that might be worthwhile?
We have a fall fair in September, second weekend of September. It'll be on the Sunday. So that's a possibility. There's of course the Cache Creek Outdoor Market every Saturday now between now and the end of or the beginning of October. And then there's also an outdoor market in Clinton at Honey's Mercantile on Caribou Highway. That's every Sunday from 10 till 2. And with Clinton having just joined this, joined the program, that might be a good place to go set up to promote and create some awareness in Clinton about the program.
Yeah, that's one of the events the municipal staff suggested we go to, so that's good. Dr. Graham.
Yes, in September, we have the Garlic Fest in Lower Nicola, and it's hosted by the Pioneer Park people, but it also brings in a lot of the local farmers.
So I think, Christina, I'm not sure, did you look into Garlic Festival and there was nothing advertised for this year yet? Is that right? Not yet, but do you know it will? Okay, even just a contact, just to let them know we're interested in a booth there, that would be great. Okay, in terms of training, right now we have 4 training sessions planned for staff working in the member municipalities that have joined the Tnrd Invasive Plant Service. The training is mostly for park staff and public works staff so that when they're out doing their work, they can keep their eyes open for invasive plants. We don't really have any targeted training sessions and we typically deliver as requested. But I guess I want to put it out to you folks. Is it okay to continue to deliver as requested, or should we move towards developing more formal training sessions? And I kind of circle back to what the ISCBC had online. Is there a need for more formal, maybe online training opportunities in our region? And if so, what would those be?
I feel like a formal, especially like an online training might be difficult. Just speaking from our experience, so Modi, Flinro, and well, then Flinro and BC Parks, we created some invasive species online training, and it was quite a process, and it took a long time, and it was quite expensive. And it can be very beneficial, but it's then kind of difficult to change and adapt to other situations and things like that. So I think if the training that you're currently doing is and something that's a little bit more adaptable and flexible to the target audience, especially if you're out in the field or something like that, that's really the best training that you're going to get. So I would suggest keeping it delivered the way it is now.
Any other thoughts, comments? Nope. Okay.
Moves us into social media. So this year we're expanding our social media platform to include Twitter. So if you haven't already, please follow us on Twitter and Facebook. We're working on setting up a summer schedule of weekly campaigns for social media. These include our We Weed of the Week, Invasive Species Action Month series on best practices. And we're talking about highlighting new invaders and a tour of the Tnrd, highlighting different plants around the region. In regards to the website, we have continued to grow the invasive plant gallery. So there is a gallery we've started. So if you have people asking about regional invasive plants, maybe direct them to our gallery, because when you click on the picture, there is a fact sheet for each of the plants that offers ID descriptions and management options. So I also have a vision of updating our education and outreach program page to kind of integrate with what the ISCBC is doing. So talking more with Jen and figuring out what those regional resources are that we can build and kind of build them into nice, tiny, accessible packages for teachers on our website. So my idea would to have more of a regional focus on our material, highlighting regional invasive plants and regional invasive plant issues, which is what Director Roden had kind of referenced, and the importance of keeping things on the, well, local as well. And yeah, I just feel like that's one of the things that's kind of been plaguing me is our education and outreach program. We're doing it, but we need to package it and organize it. So that's kind of on my radar for this year. So any comments on how to improve that? If we should improve that?
Just a clarification, Instagram is what we're newly doing, not Twitter.
Sorry,
Correct?
Instagram.
Yeah, so we're launching an Instagram.
I said Twitter, didn't I? I just aged myself. I'm like so not up on the social media. Like, what's Instagram? Okay. So key actions for goal 2, which is improve invasive plant management coordination throughout the Tnrd. So we have a few planned actions to support this goal. So to support our strategy to enhance coordination of Operation Invasive Plant Management activities, we did host our annual land managers meeting. We are supporting the GCC with their management efforts in Lac du Bois. And we're also supporting member municipalities through our service expansion and offering them more education and outreach opportunities. But as you can see, there's still a few strategies within our plan that we aren't currently addressing, and we'll kind of, Jamie's going to lead a little session on that later to maybe brainstorm some ideas if and what we need to do to support those. So yeah, not a lot happening for goal 2. Goal 3 is to influence and encourage operational policy and invasive plant management in the Tnrd. And this is our last goal to address. So this year we're hoping to update the Tnrd invasive plant bylaw to reflect changes in the regional plant priorities for our region. So our list is it's old and it doesn't reflect what's happening right now. And as mentioned, that might be a task for our summer intern. In terms of lobbying for resources, there's a few things we could potentially do, which are listed on the screen. But we'll talk about the provincial budget consultations a little bit later in the agenda. We also have a strategy aimed at seeking additional funding opportunities. So we have reached out, like I said, to a few external funders, Canada Summer Jobs, Eco Canada. We've also been in discussion with Red Cross, but nothing concrete has come out of those applications or discussion. From what we know with Red Cross, there was some money left over from the 2017 wildfires, but they're not really sure how they're allocating it. And then any support for the 2021 wildfires, they're still trying to figure out their budget lines internally, and that money probably won't be available for until 2023, if at all, for invasive plants. So it's kind of all up in the air. Anything to add on that, Jamie? With the Red Cross stuff?
No, nothing really further to add on that. We're just, what happened, just I guess a background of what happened in 2017, or actually it was 2018, is that we became aware that, they were open to sort of this kind of more long-term recovery stuff after dealing with immediate needs with donated funds. And so we're keeping the lines of communication open to see if they're interested in another proposal from us. But so far, nothing.
Yeah, we need to find the money tree. So hard to find it. All right, so that's the end of that agenda item. So any questions for me on what we're planning for this summer? For this year in terms of education outreach and coordination?
Thank you, Colleen. Any questions, comments? When Earth Kids, I meant to tell you, you should get in touch with the grade 3-4 teacher at Cache Creek Elementary. His name is David Dumont, and the kids there are very interested in gardening. They've got a big permaculture garden out behind the school. And I know he's been doing it for a few years now. So even though he's only doing it hands-on with the grade 3-4 class, there are a lot of kids there who have gone through that now. So they're very, very interested out there about gardening, the nature, biology, how everything works together. I think there's probably a way that you could fit invasive plants in there, metaphorically speaking, not literally.
I just have a couple comments. First of all, the strategy lobbying for resources there, definitely support those. The UBCM is a great place to do it. Also letters to the ministries. I haven't gotten my letter this year yet. I have the past couple of years. And as I've discussed, it normally filters down. It's a letter to the minister. It normally filters down to me to respond. And that response would be that I don't have any additional funding other than the additional funding that we got for the flood work. That said, that's still good ammunition for me to just keep on file, to keep the pressure on, to try and ask for more in the future. So I'm encouraging people to send me those letters now.
Just a question for you. Does the minister or ADM actually read them? Or do they just kind of get filed right down to your desk?
I can't say that, but if at some point I can provide the stack of letters and say, you are familiar with these, aren't you? And then put them on the spot. So I don't know at what level it gets considered. It is a very high level though, like above my director even. So perhaps ADM level is more familiar with it. We're working on them, trying to get it to invasives to be a priority. And then just with respect to the Red Cross funding, if they need any encouragement, you can tell them that the worst fires in BC history have all come in the last 5 years, the three worst fires. So if they need any justification on how bad the fire situation has been, I think that really drives it home. So hopefully you can get that funding for last year's fires as soon as possible.
So do you want us to write a letter to the Ministry of Transportation?
I do, yes,
requesting more
please do.
funds?
Yeah, yeah.
I'll be going to UBCM and I'd be glad to take it to one of the ministers, whatever department I need to. You can do the ammunition, I'll do it.
Okay, team, thank you.
I like that. That's excellent. You
So
know,
I'll make a note that will MOTI letter, and then Herb is offered to speak at UBCM. Okay.
So maybe just on that, I'm looking at Agnes's way though. So if there's a formal meeting request for UBCM, that'll go through the board. So
Does this committee want to make a recommendation that we set up a formal meeting, that a request go to the board for a formal meeting at UBCM?
I think so, and the chair is going to be there as well, so I'm sure he'd be going to be on board with that.
Okay. Would somebody like to make that motion? That this committee recommend to the board that a meeting be set up with Ministry of Transportation? And
if I may add that word.
Any speakers on?
Just before that motion goes ahead, yeah, I'm going to speak to some Ministry of Forests in a moment, who's not at the table here today, but I would, if we're making that motion now, I would recommend that Ministry of Forests be included in that motion.
And if I could just add that the timing is right for that, it's perfect right now, if that's what the committee wants to do.
So would that be a motion to meet with both MODI and Ministry of Forests? Would that be a joint meeting or too hard to coordinate? Okay.
Ministry of Environment has been included in those letters and UBCM meetings in the past, so because they control BC Parks. So yeah, throw all three in.
Yeah, I just think thinking about conversations with Stephanie, their budgets are very small for invasive plant management. So
exactly why we should be meeting with them.
yeah.
And they do, the three ministries work very closely together. We work under the same PMPs. So I would suggest that all three ministries be contacted together if possible, but individually if need be.
so the motion, if I may, is that this committee recommends to the Board of Directors that requests be sent to meet with the Ministry of Transportation, Ministry of Forests, and Ministry of Environment at the UBCM convention to discuss invasive plant funding.
Yeah, that's moved by Director Graham. Do we have a seconder? I'll second. Discussion? All those in favor? Carried. Those of you online, if we don't hear from you, we'll assume that you're agreeing quietly. Okay, we do have a recommendation that the committee adopt. Oh, no, sorry, hang on, that the Thompson Nicola Invasive Plant Management Committee 2021 Education and Outreach Work Plan be received for information. Huh. Who would like to move that recommendation? Graham, thank you. Do I have a seconder? Herb, thank you very much. All those in favor? That's carried. And item 7.4, I understand we're switching to Jamie now.
All right. All right. So not that, we've just spent the last hour and a half listening to all the work that Colleen and her team are doing. So not that she has any shortage of work. So that's not the intent of this discussion. But what we wanted to do here is going back to the strategic plan that Colleen talked about, all the stuff we're doing. What we want to do is just sort of highlight areas of the strategic plan and let the committee know areas that at this point we have no action for. So not necessarily saying we need to come up with action right now, but we just want to acknowledge that at this point, there's no actions that we're pursuing. So I'm just going to kind of walk through those, and for the sake of time, we won't spend a lot of time. So part of this is just for everyone to be aware of and to go back and think about it. And if there's any ideas that we should be collectively working on as a committee or something that we could take on as staff, you can bring those forward now or after. So So relating to goal 1, this is the kind of list of areas that that we're not actively covering. So again, Colleen already covered the stuff that we are doing, but areas that we're looking to sort of develop more work or develop an action on is identifying key pathways of invasive plant introduction, identifying the spread of vectors of spread, support regional assessments, act as a lead agency for regional invasive plant reports. Now I should back up. The asterisks in here are, so these are all of the strategies. The asterisks are the areas that we're not actively have a plan for. So the top 3 there, again, if there's any suggestions now or to take home to think about what we can or should be doing around that, we're all ears. And the bottom 3, correct me if I'm wrong, Colleen, we're already working on those 3 activities.
Well, I think Graham already identified the introduction and spread is the huge amount of stuff we've seen transported around. I mean, a lot of it I know is coming from Ashcroft, around Ashcroft, and I know it's been taken down to Highway 8. And I honestly had not thought of the invasive plant aspect until you mentioned it today. I thought, holy cats. Yeah, there's a lot of gravel coming off that hillside above Ashcroft, and who knows what's in it. And it's not just what's in the gravel, but the trucks that are traveling up and down the highway. I mean, that's huge.
So just on that note, I forgot to update the committee that I have joined the Provincial Soils Working Group, which hopefully will educate me more on this topic and also get some more regional resources or provincial resources towards the topic. So I'll be going to the first meeting, which is next month. Yeah. So just wanted to let you guys know that. So maybe we are doing a little bit of action on the prevention of spread.
Yeah, if I can just jump in, first of all, great to have you on the soils working group. It's good to have some representation from the interior. Right now, we only have representation from the Okanagan Smilkameen as far as interior groups. So it's great to have you. As far as identifying key pathways, I guess we need to sort of separate out identifying from actually addressing, right? So identifying is as simple as just putting together a list of the different pathways that we have. And I'm actually working on something very similar to that at the provincial level right now. So I can probably share with you some information on the pathways that we're looking at. And then I guess, yeah, the next step would be which ones fall into sort of your scope of work, like which can the TNI-PMC actually address, which ones you want to address versus ones that are addressed at the provincial or even federal level that you don't have responsibility or interest in getting involved in. So I think that would be kind of the first step. So I can kind of help out with some resources for that.
That would be great. Do you guys have that list pretty much established, or is it a working thing right now?
It's pretty much established. I'm actually going through the process. So like I said, doing something very similar at the provincial level, looking at those pathways and scoring which ones we are addressing at the provincial level right now. So I think it would be, the same for you, just same process for you, taking that list and determining which ones the TNI-PMC is addressing at various levels, whether it's sort of an education and outreach, or whether there's actually policy in place, or whether there's actually like operational management of it. Sort of those are kind of the 3 levels that we're looking at for each one of the pathways.
Pretty cool. Thanks for doing my work.
Yeah.
I was going to say maybe you and I could kind of follow up or work together over the next little bit here to kind of tease out where we could fit in all of that.
Yeah, I think so.
Works.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, look at that. We're already checking things off the to-do list. Okay, well, moving on to the second one. Can't go back. Okay, goal 2, the improve invasive plant management coordination throughout the TNRD. So improving invasive plant management partnerships, enhancing coordination of operational invasive plant management activities, and enhancing available tools and resources for invasive plant management are sort of areas we've identified that we're not actively pursuing. And I guess I'll highlight sort of the second point there, enhancing coordination of operational invasive plant activities. I would, we're doing that, and I kudos to Colleen for doing a lot of work and effort to her annual land managers meeting to try coordinate that. But I think we're challenged at getting real coordination in terms of when the rubber hits the road in terms of on the ground treatments and that operational coordination piece that I think there's still work to be done and efficiencies to be gained there. We kind of get together at the end of the year and find out what people are doing, but there's not as much of that upfront that we're wanting to see happen. Anything to add to that, Colin?
No, I just for those of you that were involved with the Southern Interior Committee, it was kind of those side meetings where we sat down with maps and kind of planned out what we were going to do. That's kind of the feeling that I get that is missing right now. I think there's a lot of coordination through inter-ministries, but probably not getting relayed out to other groups, I guess.
Yeah, I'd agree from Modi's point of view. I think with other regional organizations, the benefit for us comes from that sort of pooled funding pot and a RESO doing work on behalf of ourselves as well as other ministries and other land managers and kind of doing that coordination for us. Because TNI-PMC isn't operational, we can bring people together and encourage that discussion, but keeping it going outside of this meeting is always the toughest part. So I don't know, maybe we need to formalize those meetings and have sort of a dedicated operational meeting more frequently or something like that. I'm not sure, some kind of touch base throughout the season to make sure that people are actually still talking to each other and coordinating their actions. That might be a lot to ask. I don't know.
I think during the planning phase, in February, it'd be good to pull those key land managers together and kind of highlight those key areas where we could all work together. I don't know if another formal meeting mid-season would be a good idea. Well, would be feasible just for one, because everybody's so busy, but just getting an idea of where are you treating and what are you treating, and can we do some roadside treatments? I met with BC Parks and I sat down with her and we went through each of the parks and said, are there any transportation roads adjacent to the parks you're managing? Well, let's treat those through kind of a good neighbor style thing. So just be good to get more people to join that kind of conversation, I guess.
Yeah, and I guess through the Modi lens, we do border with many of those different land managers. So at least doing our work through you, that does have that benefit. I guess it's the ones outside of that, right? How is Winrow speaking or coordinating with BC Hydro, for example? I don't know, right? Probably not a lot. So yeah, I'm not exactly sure the best way to coordinate that kind of work outside of the TNI-PMC.
Okay, well, good discussion, something we can, again, take away to, and if you have further thoughts, send them along to us. Okay, so goal 3 is to influence and encourage operational policy and invasive plant management throughout the TNRD. And so those 3 strategies that we have are making recommendation to policy changes to government agencies, providing comment on regulation, compliance, and enforcement issues, and look to secure long-term stable funding for invasive plant management. So those are all things that we are doing, but again, we're bringing this up. Is there additional other things that we should be looking at through this committee of doing? I mean, some of this, I mean, this goes back to the motion that just was carried around looking for, you know, secure long-term funding would be part of that discussion at UBCM. Any further comments or thoughts on these strategies? What we're not already doing?
I was wondering if there could be some wording that Shwakam Tribal might be able to use for invasive plant management on cut blocks or road rehab or Ministry of Forest Fire Guards rehab for recommendations for management strategies, I guess, for invasives. Would the committee be able to help us out with that?
Yes. So do you mean like when you're providing comment through consultation?
Yeah, like when we do the field work, we do a final report and then we provide recommendations or direction on what they should do after we complete the field work.
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea of us just, you know, providing you some generic language that you can build into those plans. Is that what you're getting at, Morgan?
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. I'm looking at Colleen. It sounds like something we can do, eh? Work with Morgan on that. Yeah. Okay. Oh, Colleen's microphone was just off. Morgan, Colleen just said that she'll connect with you directly on that, but that sounds like a great idea.
Thank you.
I'm assuming that if secure, long-term, stable funding was out there and easily accessible, someone would have stumbled across it long before now. I mean, how achievable is that? I mean, I know every, I mean, I've been on this now 19, 20, 24th year. So this is the 4th spring of, you know, cobbling together 10,000 here and 20,000 here and a student funding thing here. And I don't know, maybe just go away and think about how is it out there? And if so, how do we find it? And I guess the first thing is that long-term stable funding out there, or are we chasing a unicorn?
I would have a comment on that, you know, in the sense that there seems to be different priority put on it by different ministries. So to give a bit of kudos to the Ministry of Transportation, even though they can't guarantee us every year what their funding level is, looking backwards, historically, you could argue there is stable long-term funding coming from the Ministry of Transportation. Whereas when we look at the Ministry of Forest and Ministry of Environment, it's very up and down and inconsistent. So I think that's partly where this idea is coming from, that without saying it so directly, that, you know, if the other ministries looked at invasive plants and funded them regularly like Modi is doing, we would be able to have more kind of operational long-term planning.
And just to add on to that, just through discussion with the regional invasive species organizations, kind of, I think the general feel is that they would like to see a standing budget line item in each of those ministries for invasive plants. I don't know if there is one or if they just kind of pull excess funds from wherever to throw at invasive plants, but I think that's the overall goal, is for a line item and a baseline budget each year.
Yeah, I can just clarify. So you're correct. Like for Modi, it is essentially a line item. It is as consistent to funding as provincial government can provide. I mean, there's always the possibility that they could scoop the money away from us at any time if they felt like it. But I think given the current economic situation. If that was going to happen, it probably would have happened by now. So, and in the grand scheme of Modi's budget, my budget is relatively small, so it's pretty safe. Flinro, I will speak on their behalf, even though they're not here. Their funding does come from sort of year-end funding. It is much less secure. I don't know all the details about exactly where it comes from, but yeah, in general, it's not as consistent as ours. That is something that they definitely recognize, and they have been pushing hard for years to not only get consistent funding, but significantly expand it. Obviously, that hasn't happened yet, but it is something that they work on all the time. So hopefully one day it will happen, but I haven't heard anything, any rumblings about that happening yet.
Okay, any other comments on that? This list of strategies? Okay. We're moving on to the next agenda item.
Is the funding something that we should be adding to our checklist of what we want to talk about at UBCM? When we're meeting with all these people, since we're going to have them buttonholed anyway?
I would suggest that would be a default assumption of that.
Okay.
Recommendation.
But it can't hurt to, let's see the color of your money, stranger. All right, we move on to 7.5, Ministry of Forests Invasive Plant Program and Resources. Where are my cheat notes? And this is Jamie again.
So maybe we could have discussed this up front, because we've kind of been hinting at it, through some of the discussion, and are already kind of addressing some of what we'll speak to in a minute here through the UBCM resolution that's going forward to the board. But now, just from a staff perspective, we thought it was important to sort of highlight some, operational challenges that we're having, like Colleen's having, from the operational side of things, and as well as that we're hearing around the province from other operational committees. And so it's, this is the state of the nation with the Ministry of Forest specifically, is their invasive plant program is from, well, the facts are that they're at the current state, they're under-resourced because they have a number of vacancies that aren't being filled in terms of staffing. So it's been a challenge for us to sort of get clear plans and communications from them. And this is by no means that, their current staff, they're doing a poor job. It's just they're stretched very thin. And our understanding is they have vacancies that aren't being filled, aren't being posted. So that's been a challenge for operational planning, specifically when it comes, back to what we were talking about in our strategic plan, trying to coordinate regionally our operations. They haven't been able to be, fully part of those discussions because they just don't have the capacity to be planning treatments at the same time. Colleen and Graham, for example, are trying to coordinate planning for highway right-of-ways. In addition to that, the further challenge is that back to the budget discussion, their budget, as Colleen mentioned, the contributions to this committee for our education outreach through their grant program, that has been reduced, as well as the dollars that they're spending directly on the ground treatment of their own jurisdiction. So Crown land under MOFR jurisdiction is been pretty significantly reduced over the years, especially from a few years back under the pilot program. So for example, in the Tnrd this year, they've let us know that their treatment budget is around $70,000 for Crown land treatments within the Tnrd. So back to a slide that Colleen showed us about an hour ago, was that collectively all agencies and individuals within the region are investing $1.8 million last year. And, obviously the largest land manager is the Ministry of Forests, and there's, you know, pretty small contribution there. So I guess, you know, part of what we wanted just is to raise this concern. The motion that this committee already made, you know, I think is in part going to try send this message to the Minister of Forests through that meeting at UBCM. So that was part of what we wanted to kind of bring forward to this committee. So I guess just in closing, to open up for discussion, was these two questions: sort of what can this committee do to support the Ministry of Forests Invasive Plant Program, and, you know, how do we again ensure or support getting adequate resources towards the Crown land that's under Ministry of Forest jurisdiction. Bit of an open-ended question that we're just putting out there for discussion, if there's any thoughts or comments.
If I may, I also feel like now is the time, because they just went through the reorg, and I think they have a new ADM, and I feel like the more we squeak, the more they might hear. So, and maybe it's an opportunity where changes can happen. So I'm just curious, it's come through my mind if we want to start with a letter again to the Ministry of Forests and then follow up through UBCM.
Hello, it's Morgan Jumbo here again. I'm not sure if you guys are aware of the FREP Forest Range Evaluation Program with Ministry of Forest. I'm wondering if there's any way we could, you know, take target sampling or random sampling of you know, some cut blocks, or maybe in some of our maps we have known travel routes for invasives. Maybe we can link it back to each other that way. Just a suggestion.
Yeah, thanks for that, Morgan. Can you elaborate on that a bit? So where is that information? Where would that be going? You're already conducting those surveys?
Well, we do not entirely. The ministry staff does most of the sampling, and we kind of go with them for targeted sampling and random sampling, but we're not involved entirely in all aspects of FREP. But I think maybe this is one way we can get it addressed. I don't know how many different categories are within FREP. I'm sure invasives could fall into one of them. Maybe we could try to get some targeted sampling or random sampling that way.
Yeah, thanks for that, Morgan. We could look into that one. So remind me what that stood for? Forest Range FREP?
Forest Range Evaluation Program. So they go back after a block has been harvested, 3 to 5 years after the block has been harvested.
Okay, thanks, Morgan. Okay, if there was nothing further on that discussion, I'll turn it back to the chair.
Okay, thank you very much. And we go back to Colleen, Select Standing Committee on Finance and Government Services Annual Public Consultation.
Okay, so so a little bit of background for you all. Each year, the Select Standing Committee on Finance and Government Services administers a province-wide consultation to seek the views of BC residents. They compile all of the received information and provide recommendations to the Legislative Assembly, who I believe makes all the provincial budgets. The budget consultation process for next year, so 2023, opens May 30th and closes June 24th. And there's a few ways to participate, which include an in-person presentation, completing an online survey or providing written comments. So for this year, we've missed the deadline for in-person presentations, but we do have the option to do the online survey or provide written comments. So this kind of came up at our last Regional Invasive Species Organization Working Group meeting. In past, we've collectively presented to the standing committee, but I don't think that's happening this year. And there was an ask for the regional committees to kind of participate in this program or this process for this year individually. So we are planning to put forth a written submission that kind of addresses the need for increased stable funding, you know, updated enforceable regulations and legislation around invasive plants, such as the legislation to ban import and export of invasive species and that sort of thing. And yeah, so I just wanted to let you know, we're going to plan to write a letter to kind of state our need. I did provide you guys in the agenda package the regional committee's kind of key messages that they've included in the past, but just wanted to, sorry guys, I'm behind a slide. Couple of slides. Just wanted to make sure you were aware of that and to kind of pick your brains to see what sort of key messaging should be included in that letter to the standing committee for our region. Anybody have ideas other than funding, changes in legislation, enforcement? Any other key pieces that need to be included?
I think just going back to the reliable funding is just going to be such a huge piece of it, because then you can actually do some forward planning, which, yeah, long term.
Yeah, and in our last committee meeting too, like our messaging has kind of been status quo. We need more money, but I think it's the sexy topics, for lack of a better term, that are getting the funding. So if we can kind of tweak our request and concerns to big issue items like climate change and fires and flooding, then maybe it'll be heard better and more. So I was just maybe going to write it in that sort of context.
Well, I'm thinking back to 2017 with the Elephant Hill wildfire, and I mean, cynically, I was telling groups in the Ashcroft area, you know, if you're looking for funding, do it now, because when the next big disaster hits, we're going to be forgotten and all this money is going to dry up. So I think that if we're going to go for a sexy angle, fires. I mean, last year's wildfire season in the TNRD was absolutely unprecedented. And I mean, the fallout from that is going to be felt for years, from a geographic morphology, soil erosion, invasive plant spread, everything. I mean, just look at all the what is it, 2,600 kilometers of fire guards were built. Oh my goodness, you know, you might as well put out a sign for the invasive plants saying, here you go, find a home. So yeah, and I think we have to really play on that very cynically, but we have to do it, because one more bad fire season somewhere else and we're yesterday's news, which is, I'm sorry to put it so bluntly, but that's how it's going to work.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that one. I completely agree. Sorry, did I interrupt somebody? No, thought I did. Okay.
Oh, it's Holly Campbell here.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, and what I just wanted to mention is something I think in, you know, any submission, we really need to put, the cost of the invasives should be included too. It's the cost of controlling them when they get out of hand, the cost of ruining, the fact that they destroy natural habitat and other valuable plants that are that provide provide income or that are valuable, and they're expensive too as far as aesthetics. And I think for a lot of organizations and government, it's better to protect than to try to fix a problem. And if we can indicate how expensive they are, I think that's a really a good selling feature too for for anything when we're trying to get across what, what's important, not just to us, but to the general population.
I'm wondering too if a suggestion could be made about, having routine prescribed burns for specific areas, or even, it could be even smaller areas too, and then expand on that year after year, I guess. Could that be a key message?
It could be. We would just have to link that to invasive plant management, how it's going to benefit invasive plants in the long run. Otherwise, kind of asking for that prescribed landscape level management might not be the right place for us to kind of include it.
If I can just jump in, tying that back to the climate change issue. Modi has tried to do a couple relatively small prescribed burns the last few years. And we've actually, ironically, had to hold off on them because the fire risk has been too high early in the season, or there's already fires that have started and we have no resources to actually safely control that burn as they're doing it, because the firefighters that will be needed for that are already treating active fires. That is partially because of climate change and conditions getting drier and warmer earlier in the season. It is also because of invasive plants, particularly cheatgrass and some of the other early season annual grasses, which dry off, harden off earlier in the season and push that fire risk even earlier than it would otherwise be. So I think making the invasive plant fire risk climate change kind of argument really makes sense. It does fall down a little bit in that cheatgrass is so widespread and so difficult to treat that we are not treating it as a general rule. Excuse me, that's not to say that there aren't other invasive plants that do push the fire risk earlier into the season. We don't have, I believe we have one site of Scotch broom in the Tnrd. Is that correct? Or at least one historic site? Yeah. But that is a species that I think would do very well here if it ever was introduced and became established. And it is an extreme fire risk, essentially year round. It is very oily and it just goes up like nothing. So we can also sort of argue it for species that aren't here yet, but could be if they're introduced, or maybe they may have more suitable habitat here as climate change shows its effects. And then regarding just budgets, cost of treatment, one of the arguments that I've used lately to try and stress that we need more funding is just cost of inflation. That's a big one, particularly this year, but even going back historically, just our money doesn't go as far as it used to. Contractors cost more, fuel costs more to get to different sites. So if we have the same budget year over year, we're treating less and less. It's as simple as that. Not even factoring into account new infestations. So it's not just as simple as you have a new infestation, you treat it this year and it's done. If it's a species with a long seed bank, one infestation, one plant means you are managing that site potentially for decades. Meanwhile, you're still managing everything else that was on your table. So it's not taking the place of something, taking the place of another site or another infestation. It's in addition to every single time. And that's something that I've been trying to stress and have had getting some ears listening to, but so far haven't really been able to get any increased funding because of it. But it seems to be something that seems to get attention.
Any other thoughts, ideas, contributions, suggestions? Okay, thank you very much. We move on to item 8, new business. Is there any? No. Item 9, roundtable. And I know that Colleen, you've got an update from the Ministry of Forests who could not be here, but you're going to present something for them.
Yeah, so Crystal Chadburn was kind enough to give me a quick update on the Ministry of Forests, and I'll just read it out to you folks. So she said the budgets for the 2022-23 fiscal year have been confirmed, and they're moving forward with procurement of their provincial EDRR contracts and a few high priority projects across BC. So there are a few EDRR sites in the TNRD that they will be managing, but there are no high priority projects in the region that they're focusing on. They are able to extend some of their auxiliary staff and hire 2 new summer auxiliaries, which will be based out of their Nelson office. They were able to secure end of fiscal funding again at the very end of March 2022 for shared cost agreements and grants with their nonprofit, local government, and Indigenous partners. TNRD received funding through this pot to support coordination and awareness for the TNI PMC. So that was the 26,000 that we received. They also provided an agreement to a local Indigenous partner, and they are in the process of planning, and they're finalizing site lists for treatment in the TNRD. This will be the only contractors they have working in the TNRD this year, other than the provincial EDRR work. So they are doing, they're going to do some EDRR treatment and treatment of some high priority plants only this year. Cheryl Wirtz is on leave until further notice, and her return date's not known at this time. So if you have any correspondence, please send it to Crystal Chadburn, who's the senior invasive plant specialist, until further notice. They say with Cheryl off at the border zone, and their border zone specialist position vacant, the invasive plant program has limited staff capacity at this time, and they appreciate your patience and understanding as they do their best to respond. They're also expecting a number of retirements over the next year. So Susan Turner, who is with their biocontrol program, is also retiring. So it's going to be a period of transition for their program. And she says with lots of opportunity. So we'll see. She also gave the update on Invasives BC, and I won't go through that because I already talked about it, which that's the provincial invasive plant database. They're going to continue with their biocontrol program, including monitoring of biocontrol efficacy on spotted knapweed within the TNRD in partnership with Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. They're working together with the Cascades District Range staff and UBC to address some of the post-wildfire monitoring and seeding requirements. I did ask if she could elaborate on that point because it wasn't really clear what it was about, and she said no, not at this time. They're still in planning, so I'm not sure what that piece is about. She said the province recent reorganization is now complete with a new Ministry of Land, Water and Resource Stewardship created, and the current Ministry of Flynn Road is shifting into a Ministry of Forests. So the invasive plant program has remained within the Ministry of Forest under a new division called Timber, Range and Economics, and she has TRE division. So far, it doesn't appear that any major changes are expected for the invasive plant program, although we do have a new ADM who is now excited to learn about the invasive plant file. As always, they continue to work closely with Ministry of Transportation on all aspects of invasive plant management, including a project to map tree of heaven within some areas in the Thompson Nicola via Tnrd cruise. And if you have any questions about their programs or invasive plant management on MOF jurisdiction, contact Crystal directly.
All right, so roundtable. So chance for anyone who's got anything that they want to bring up that hasn't already hit the floor. Graham.
Yeah, I'll just jump in. So as Colleen mentioned, we are both members of the Soils and Invasive Species Working Group, which is a subcommittee of the Interministry Invasive Species Working Group. We have just kicked off a pretty neat project. It's a safe soils feasibility study. So the point of this is to look at the possibility of creating a safe or certified weed-free soils program for the province. We've got a contractor to create the report for us. We're hoping that we'll have it by the end of this year. I'm hoping that it will come back as promising to support a project like that it would be feasible. I think it's really important to have a program like that. That would be a way that we could, well, not only Modi, but any land manager or any company doing construction could engage a company that's providing that material and be sure that they were getting soils, gravels, things like that, aggregates, any fill material that would be free of invasive plants. So please stay tuned. Hopefully we'll have hopefully I can report the results of that this time next season.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Morgan, I saw your computer screen come on. Do you have anything you want to talk about?
Oh, just that our field crews have been starting work this week doing field assessments on cut blocks and fire guards, and there's going to be quite a significant amount of cut blocks to be looked at this year. So probably anticipate quite a bit of harvesting in the next couple of years.
Okay, thank you very much. Holly, Jessica, anything? Nope. Don't see any screens leaping into life. Anyone else here in the room have anything? No, just Ashcroft Tree of Heaven. Glad to see that on the list. It seems to have gone quiet-ish in Ashcroft, but we have heard anecdotal rumors it's spreading. So yeah, and it is a nasty one. It's very hard to tackle. If you don't tackle it absolutely perfectly, from what I understand, think the trouble with tribbles, I think, is you've just suddenly got lots and lots and lots more trees of heaven if you don't do it right. So glad to see that added to the list, because that'll certainly give us some tools to, again, go to landowners and say, if you think you've got these, let us know, we'll come and deal with them.
Yeah, that's a good point about the Tree of Heaven. Chandra Moffat with Ag Canada, their biocontrol specialist, is really concerned about that species in particular. It's kind of, I think she said it's the one that keeps her up at night right now. So she's really spearheading that and has encouraged land managers like Modi and Tnrl and others to get up-to-date inventory on it. So I'm glad that Colleen has offered to assist with that. We really appreciate it. I also just have a question for Morgan. Morgan, I believe you're very familiar with the fire impacted areas. Are you aware of any salvage logging or plans for salvage logging in that area? In your area in particular?
Yes, there will be. I know Waco over in Princeton probably has some on the go right now. There's probably some fire salvage blocks that haven't come across my desk yet. They're probably still in the referral letter stage and desktop review stage, but would probably anticipate a whole bunch of fire salvage for sure.
Right. Okay. Thanks for the heads up on that.
You might want to check with the Logan Lake Community Forest as well about what they might be doing up there, because of course they were pretty heavily impacted as well.
Yeah, their woodlot is quite impacted too, and we'll probably have some work up there this year.
Anything else? Sorry, I'm sorry I'm packing up here. I have a public meeting at Ashcroft at 6, and I don't want to be one of those people who breezes in to chair the meeting at 1 minute 2. So I'm just getting ready for a quick getaway here. for the, within the speed limits, drive back to Ashcroft.
I guess I have a question for you, Graham, on the tree of heaven. What's going to be done with the inventory data? And it's a regional EDRR species, so I mean, we can help to a limit of kind of managing these plants. I'm just curious what the big picture is.
That's an excellent question. So in short, Chandra is very interested to know the distribution right now to get a handle on what the possible impacts would be if spotted lanternfly were to arrive. And I believe also to potentially do some trials or research plots or something like that. If she needs some, I don't know if she needs some samples or something to get an idea of perhaps genetic variation between populations within BC. I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure the biocontrol is at a fairly early stage right now. So I wouldn't hold your breath. It's not like we're going to have it next year. But as far as management in the meantime, that's a good question. Trees have been in our blind spot for quite a while, and we're realizing that's something that we need to get a handle on. The issue is that none of our regional groups are really in a position to manage them on the ground. If it's a small tree or a kind of a bush, maybe you can just potentially spray it or do a kind of a cut stump or basal bark treatment. But if it's a mature tree, that's something completely different. We can't just kill that tree because then it becomes a danger tree, which especially adjacent to the highway is a non-starter. So we would need to get equipment in there to cut it down, chip it up, potentially haul away that material. It's quite a process and it's very expensive. And right now we just don't have funding for that within our program. That's why we've tried to encourage the maintenance contractors to take care of invasive trees and given them the tools to do so they can actually use herbicide now. So far, we haven't had very many. We've only had one contractor who's taken us up on that offer.
Be able to share who?
That's AIM, so Axiona out of the Okanagan Similkameen and Columbia Shoe Swap. They haven't actually done the work yet, but they are. I just met with them a couple weeks ago, and they were very interested in taking it on because they did some work, not with a tree of heaven, but with Russian olive a couple years ago, and they had some pretty rough go of it. It was expensive to brush and chip it up, and they had an issue where there's sort of a dust on the leaves that was kind of getting airborne through the chipper and actually causing some breathing difficulties in some of the crew. So they were really interested. They said, if we can just spray this stuff and cut it down and leave it on site, fantastic. So they just really, with them though, it comes down to whether it makes financial sense. So to get somebody certified or hire a subcontractor to treat those plants is probably going to be more expensive. But if they only need to do that once every few years rather than annually like they're currently doing, then maybe it will make financial sense for them. But at the end of the day, that has to be it comes down to the bottom line for them.
Okay. I was just thinking about our new invader program because it is listed on there. I'm just wondering what we would
so
have
that's
someone
where
come in and cut down a mature tree on their property.
Yeah, we did it a couple summers ago for a Siberian elm, and it was a few $1,000s to cut down 2 mature trees. So and a days of work. We had to shut down a lane. Like it was a big job for just one site. So to do miles and miles of highway is going to be cost prohibitive. And in time as well, and staff resources to coordinate it. That said, though, I think that is why encouraging public education about it and early management so that we can catch them when they're small. If it's this big, yeah, you can just spray it or just cut it with some loppers. But if it's 30 feet tall, that's not going to happen. So we need to catch them early.
Okay, and then my last question on that topic is there any other areas to survey other than Ashcroft? Like is Merritt kind of on the Merritt Kamloops?
That's
or
a
is that-
good question. The only sites that I know of are in Ashcroft itself, but I'm sure it's elsewhere. I would personally start there and work out.
Okay.
But it's not to say that there aren't some other outlier sites out somewhere else that we're not aware of.
Anecdotally, I've heard down towards Spence's Bridge,
Okay,
which would make sense,
for sure.
the spreading out and the travel between the two centers.
Yeah.
Anything else for the round table? No? Then that's it. All right. So the next meeting is in when? November. Okay. well,
November 16th is the next meeting.
All right. Well, some of us might be here and some of us might not be. So thank you everyone for coming out today, and motion to adjourn the meeting. I have a motion. Herb? Graham second. All those in favor? Thank you very much, everyone.